Hey, welcome back, guys. So, next episode of the LS Swap Bronco 2 project starting right now. So, this one right here, I think a lot of people have been waiting for me to get started on. We are going to start mocking up, designing the rear four-link setup for this truck. Again, the truck came kind of already it was a project, like I covered. The previous person was starting to design, well, I mean, basically to design, it was already welded in place, a double triangulated four-link setup, which again, I'm no expert in any of this stuff, but I've done two, and they both perform amazing. My Explorer, and then Brad's with Ryan Shotgun's Bronco 2. Both those four-link systems have turned out amazing. They just perform great. So must be doing something right. As far as a double triangulated setup, you mostly see those on like high-speed racing trucks or crazy rock bouncers with basically a full tube chassis. I'll cover it when the truck's up in the air, but basically the upper links and the lower links, they crisscross. But the way it was set up, the lower links were attached to a cross member that basically V into the middle of the chassis on the cross member. And at full bump, and again, I was probably way more than what we would be, but the lower link was actually hitting the frame rail on both sides at full stuff. So again, that's probably why you see those mostly on a tube chassis. The tube chassis is designed for that type of suspension. Where a regular ladder frame, stock OEM style frame, it just isn't designed for that type of stuff. Can it work? I'm sure, probably yes it can. But let's get into how we're going to do this truck. All right, so first things first, the cross member is now bolted in, so it's all painted up. Drive line is 100% bolted in and all set. So really like how that turned out. All right, so next step for the rear is we need to locate the axle left to right. So find the center of the axle. Now the guy that welded all this stuff on did a great job. So the upper links are exactly where they should be. So that's perfect. Then I found center up. I marked the cross member and marked the fuel tank skid front and rear. So that way, whichever way I'm looking at it with the laser, I know I'm getting level. So these are the axle, these are going to be the axle link brackets. That's the wrong side. These are 10-degree in. So I'll figure out how far in and then setting up and down. I'll get into that more when I get there, but basically from the center of the hole on the lower link and the center of the hole in the upper link, you want at least 25% separation for a four-link setup. The farther out the holes are, the more link separation, the more stability, the less strain, and 25% of the size tire you're planning on running. So Jeff was going to do a 37, but plans have changed. He's planning on running a 40. So we want at least 10 inches of separation. So I'll cover more of that when I get there. Again, I'm not an expert. There are Excel files that you can download. You can punch in all your measurements and it'll tell you anti-squat, anti-dive, roll center, all that information with stuff. But you can get a little bit too deep on that stuff because you're limited by the chassis or frame that you're running. And with a factory vehicle frame, you really can't manipulate the numbers too much. So Now you'd build a custom tube buggy or something like that. I mean, you can get it exactly how you want it. So I'll cover a little bit more of that when we get down the road here, but let's get started. I forgot to mention, so those are the axle side lower links. These are the frame side lower link brackets. These are going to end up going somewhere in here on the frame. That's what we're about to figure out. Obviously the truck's going to come down. I'm going to set the truck on the jack stands so that the arms are not in the way, and that way I can start working on stuff. These are the lower links that were already pre-made by the other guy. I'm unscrewing them just to double check. You know, I want to see what version Heims or whatever are on these. It looks like they are a rebuildable, some type of enduro joint from Barnes. They look really nice. They're rebuildable, grease fittings. And I don't have a standard Heim on hand, but I believe these are about an inch longer threaded shank. So that's cool. It's going to give us per link 2 inches more adjustability than what a regular Heim would provide. So all right, so I took the one apart here. I put some fresh anti-seize on it, threaded them all the way in, get everything nice and smooth. Obviously they've been sitting for a minute. Everything was pretty stiff and there wasn't really hardly any anti-seize on it to begin with. Got them locked down. It's kind of cool. I did buy a set of these what do you call them? Jam nut wrench kit. So I just finally got to use it. You put them on a 1/2 inch breaker bar ratchet, and you can crank down the jam nuts on any of your links and stuff that you make. So glad I bought that. That's from Moto Built. They had a Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale. Anyway, so I threaded them all the way in. I backed them out about 9/16 of an inch. So that sets them center to center at 38 inches. I'm going to start with this. Another rule of thumb is basically you want your links a minimum of 2 times the length of the stroke shock you're going to be running. So we're going to be running 14-inch ORIs in the back, so 14 times 2 is 28. So we are, I mean, I couldn't imagine anyone running a 28-inch link. So 38 inches is what we're going to start with here and see how that looks. I think I read you don't really want to go over like 42 or 44 inches with, I guess, 2-inch, but if you go bigger or the aluminum stuff, I don't know. Again, not an expert. So I'm going to get the second one matched to this one, and then we'll start laying stuff out. All right, so I've been kind of playing around with axle placement. I had the truck all the way down basically until something touched. And basically what that was is the top of the upper link mount. Basically I had touching that cross member a little bit. So obviously that's way exaggerated for bumps. So basically I went 2 inches, I raised the truck back up 2 inches off of that. So that's going to give me a nice full bump. And then obviously by raising the truck up 2 more inches, I was able to move the axle back a little bit more because I wasn't contacting that. Hard to explain, but that's just how it worked out. So I've never done a 9-inch before, but what I'm finding out here is a 9-inch is so much flatter in the back. On the previous 8/8 4-link I've done, stretching it just seemed to be quite a pain, where we actually weren't able to use the factory skid plate or gas tank. So this is kind of a cool thing here, knowing that a 9-inch can basically stretch out as far as it can here and keep the factory tank and setup. So that was Jeff's goal. So that's working out great. On top of that, the high 9, I mean, the ground clearance is just amazing. Anyway, so like I was saying, I full stuffed it extreme. and then I raise the truck up 2 inches. That's my full bump. Basically what's going to happen here is where the body mount is, the axle tube is basically going to be directly in line below it, which is cool, easy for measuring. And then at full stuff, full bump, it basically gives me about an inch, inch and a quarter from any contact, which is perfect. So right now I just quickly set the pinion angle up at ride height. So from that full bump, which I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers out there, but simulated full bump from the bottom of the frame to the floor was 28.5 inches. So I raised the truck up 5 inches to simulate ride height with 5 inches of shaft showing. So now I'm 33.5 inches from the ground. Ride height simulated. Now I can set my pinion angle, which on camera it might not look legit, but it is. It's roughly 20 degrees. Cool thing about a 4-link is you can adjust the pinion angle and fine tune it afterwards. So I'm gonna roll the axle out, set the pinion angle back at 20 degrees, and then start mocking up the lower link axle brackets. Now I got the tape out just for some giggles here. I put the tape out, and right now I'm sitting at roughly 101 to 102 inches wheelbase. So the goal was at least 100. So being able to go over 100 and potentially hit almost 102 inches and not change out a factory tank and skid plate is a bonus. And obviously the 2 inches plus that we gained in the front with how I moved that front axle out, this was the game changer here. So far it's all working out as what we kind of had planned or hoped for, the ultimate goal. I'm sure there'll be a few ups and downs moving forward, but so far I'm not mad. All right, so the axle's pulled out. Now I did make one quick mistake, so I'm glad it wasn't on camera. The only challenge with this barn floor is everything kind of goes down to this drain. So I kind of forgot about that. So now I got the axle 100% level. So what I've done now is we're going to be running a 40-inch tire. So you want 25% of tire size as your link separation. So from the center of the upper link hole to the center of the lower link hole needs to be at least 10 inches. So I've measured from the center of the hole down 10 inches. Got my laser level out. So that's going to cast a laser all the way across. Let's see if it'll show up. Where'd it go? The battery's, of course, dying. There you go. You see that line? So I'll hold that, center the hole, and then I've measured 3 inches out from the back of the, whatever you call this, the end of the tube. So where the 9-inch kind of starts necking down, I want to keep everything on the large part out. So let me get these tacked in. All right, I got the truck sitting at roughly simulated ride height. Again, like I covered earlier, I had simulated the bump, and the edge of the frame was 28.5 inches off the ground. So 5 inches up, which simulates ride height with a 5-inch shaft on the shock. I'm now 33.5 inches off the ground. That just turned off, but the pinion angle is at 20 degrees right now. And I'm centered with the body mounts on the axle tube, both sides. And side to side as well. So everything's pretty much lined up. So with the 38-inch lower link, with the lower link brackets tacked in place, this is where it wants to put the bracket, which is totally fine. Looks really good. Very proportionate to the front long arm setup. So very cool. So at this point right here, I'm gonna clean up I'm gonna mark the frame, both sides, clean all that up nice and shiny, and get ready to tack these brackets in place with the lower stuff in line. Now I can do some more measurements. Everything else will be fixed and start kind of planning out the upper links. All right, not very significant, but I've never tried this technique before. So when I had the body and frame down and everything hooked up, I marked how far the bracket was back, and from the face of the body mount here at the almost the B pillar, basically right underneath the seat, from here to the edge of the bracket was 6 9/16. So I marked that, and then these brackets come with a welding slot. So I thought, oh well, how about I try using some quarter inch bolts, drill a hole in the frame. That way I can hold the brackets, pivot them, make sure everything's 100% accurate. Because when you're holding stuff and trying to tack stuff, things move and jiggle. So something new. So from the face of the body mount over was 6 9/16, and then equal distance from the duff bracket to here was like 8 1/4, I think it was. So I did that on both sides, and then also shined up, cleaned up all the metal. So I'm going to lower the truck back down, test fit everything. Get these are like tight, so I can hammer them and they'll stay. I'll get these lined up equally on both sides with the links hooked up, with everything again centered and situated. And then I can go ahead and probably throw a couple tacks on them just to hold it. And then I'm going to test fit and see what the existing upper links, where those want to go. I'm not going to cut these off until I know what's going on. All right, so here are the lower link brackets in place, just with the 1/4 inch bolt snug down. And then I went ahead and tapped the brackets around to get the right angle, nice and straight. So the lower link stuff is tacked in place and mocked up. All right, so like I just said, the lower links are tacked in place. Now remember, this was a project that was already started, so we're trying to utilize and save as much of the parts and components as possible. I do like the length of the lower links, and regardless, one of the sets are going to have to get replaced anyway. They're not going to end up matching. I like the rear. I like how it's 38-inch center to center. It looks good. It's got a good angle to it. It looks nice compared to the front long arm. So, not that it's 100% the same, but I went out and measured some stuff on my Explorer on that 4-link to kind of see the measurements that I use on stuff. And I know, was it crawlopedia.com, or there's a website. With a 4-link and rock crawling and stuff, you know, you got a whole bunch of articulation. So anytime the axle droops down, you want to make sure the pinion stays. You always want the pinion to stay pointed at the T-case output. And the rule of thumb is to have the upper links slightly longer than the lower links, so it's pushing, when it goes down, it essentially pushes the pinion back, which maintains it sticking at the output. So since the since the existing upper links are only 32 inches center to center, they technically need to be 39 and a half which is 1.5 inches longer than the 38s that are on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just cut these in half, and I'm just going to butt weld in a piece of 7.5-inch tube. And then this way I'll mock up, I'll cut, tack, test all the angles, and then once I know exactly where we're at lengthwise, then we'll get 2 new pieces of tube and build brand new upper links. So let me get this spliced together. All right, so I had some scrap pieces. I only had these 2 pieces actually of 1.25 inches, 120 wall. So added 6 1/4. I wanted 7.5, but I made up the distance in the heims. So, all right, these are both 39.5 inches now, 1.5 inches longer than the bottoms. Now I got something to work with. All right, so I crawled underneath the truck with those 39.5-inch links, okay? So instantly the links are too long. Well, they're too long for where the inside frame upper link brackets are currently welded. Again, previously done. So I said, you know what? Let me try something real quick before I consider cutting those off, which I knew I'm going to have to cut them off anyway. I was able to thread the heims basically all the way in on those long links I just made for the uppers. And they were able to fit the brackets on the truss to the frame rail. So I actually was able to test out this 4-link setup with all 4 bars in place. And it's working out to be exactly what I thought would happen. So at full droop, as I'm full drooping it, raising the truck up on the hoist, I'm watching the pinion angle. It's changing, but not enough. So that's telling me that I'm correct, that moving that frame bracket forward to allow the upper link to be longer is going to push the pinion back, forcing it up while it's going full droop. So I'm about 90% of the way there with this mock-up. So maybe I'll do a little insert clip here of how it's looking as I'm raising it up. As you saw in the clip, so this is how everything's starting to look. Everything's super nice. These links, or these brackets here, are perfect. Those don't need to be moved. The heims are nice and centered on those. The angles are correct. So happy about that. Everything is just looking great. So the pinion is pointing up, but again, like I said, with the upper link longer, it'll force the pinion, up more. So it's pointing up, but not enough. So I'm going to go ahead and weld in the axle link brackets. Those are good. I'm going to go ahead and tack these in. These are still just held in by that 1/4-inch bolt. Tack those in place. And then I'm going to cut the upper brackets out and move those forward. All right, so I pulled the axle out, pulled the brakes and everything off, tires. Got everything all welded up on the axle brackets. And then I tacked these in place all the way around. Still got that bolt in there. So, like I was saying, this needs to be moved back this way. Oh, I don't know, about 4.5 inches. So that's what we'll get at next. Just gonna take the plasma cutter and cut this off, and should be fairly easy. All right, next step. I got the old plates and brackets off. Everything's cleaned up, all the weld mess that was on there, both sides. And I got new pieces of plate I'm doing 12-inch lengths now. The other ones are probably, I don't know, 8. So I'm going to go a little extra long in this area. I don't know if I mentioned it yet. I always forget where I'm at, but looks like this cross member can stay here. Even with the mount closer, full bump was close, but it didn't touch. Moving it back, I guess moving it back might make it closer yet. But worst case scenario, I will just basically do 2 slits and bend this inward, keeping the rest of the 95% of it, so no big deal. So right now I'm going to basically mount these plates 90 degrees, get those tacked in place. Once those are tacked in place on both sides, I'm using this little factory locating pin. I don't know, just going 6 1/4 inches back on both sides. So let me get these tacked in place. All right, so I'm underneath the truck here. Right now I'm at full bump. Everything stayed exactly where I wanted it. I got the upper links tacked in heavy. Did a test. Pinion angle was still off a tad, so I basically unscrewed the upper links, I think 7 full turns, and that made everything really nice. So the pinion's pointing at the T-case all the way from full bump to full droop, and at full bump, it's this factory cross member is not in the way. It actually gains space by moving the brackets back, so that's cool. It had 2 lower rivets on each side that shared the spring hanger, so I'll just put 1/2-inch bolts in those holes, so that way the stock cross member can stay. Yes, I mean, this pretty much wraps up the video. The new tubing's here, so once I take these upper links off, I'll measure those and make the new uppers to that length. Get all this stuff welded, and the rear is done as far as the 4-link goes. So maybe I'll do a clip here from full bump to full droop. Real quick, it's hard to show on camera, but this is how tight I got this. Closest spot's maybe 9/16 of an inch, and then everything else is probably 5/8 or more, although it doesn't look like it on camera. There's plenty of space with everything here, so super happy with how this all turned out. So this is a 40-inch tire. Obviously, if the truck and wheel were center with the tire, it would go up another 5 inches plus. So that just shows that once the truck, if the wheel was centered on the truck, I don't think there's going to be much to really have to cut as far as the top of the fender here. So that's a bonus. And I think the front side's going to be clear too. It's hard to see on camera, but there's, that's actually about 6.5 inches. So it's really just going to be this back corner. And I did look on the other side. Obviously the fuel filler neck is on this side, but it's up quite a bit higher. I mean, even if it had to come, I don't know. We're not there yet, but regardless, I don't think we're going to have any issues here. So, all right. All right, so this looks kind of crazy, but well, here, let me make it look better. Small tires really make it look pretty insane. There we go. That looks a little bit more proportionate. All right, so that's 14 inches of travel down, basically, from what I'm set at. So it's gonna be pretty sweet. All right, so I know this video probably went a little bit longer than what I've been trying to do, but there's just so much to do and cover and talk about. So I'm going to call this episode good. I mean, the 4-link is installed. It's done. You don't need to see what it looks like after it's welded. There'll be more footage of that stuff later on. So, all right, that wraps up the 4-link setup. Everything's been covered. Again, I'm not a professional, but everything's turning out very well, and everything looks great on this truck. So, very happy with it. So, like it, comment, subscribe if you're not. And there's so much more to go on this truck. I think after this episode, probably going to jump into the front shock towers, because again, the front suspension, well, not suspension, that's already done, but the front ride height and all that stuff needs to be set up first and good, and then the rear has plenty of room to match whatever the front ends up being. Everything should be plus or minus an inch or two from where I'm at right now, so I'm not worried about it. So yeah, come on back and see what else, see how this thing ends up finishing up down the road here.